Ladies and gentlemen, after a long, grueling saga, Arsenal have completed the signing of Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle. And yeah, I've got quite a bit to say, a few thoughts, and yeah, let's get into it. We'll start with just looking at the report itself. Obviously, David Ornstein, Bomber, he broke the news like he always does. He was the one that initially broke that we were that Bruno G wanted to come to Arsenal, that we were in talks. He had that update yesterday, I believe, that we were in the final stages. So we kind of knew that this was coming, in the coming days. But yeah, Newcastle United to sanction sale of Bruno Guimaraes to Arsenal for £75 million, which I actually think is quite interesting wording. The fact that he led it with Newcastle United to sanction sale, it kind of just reflects the theme of this transfer, that it was always going to be whether or not Newcastle were willing to let him go. And yeah, I mean, it's been a very, very weird saga to keep track of. Arsenal started lower, Newcastle wanted higher, but compromise in process of being sealed to grant 28-year-old Brazilian international midfielder desired move. And then Leon entitled to 20% of proper. I didn't realize that there was a sell-on clause, especially for 20%. So that is, good for them. Newcastle, I think, it's very. I'll get into the negotiations and all that and my thoughts in a sec. But then also Fabrizio Romano followed up with his usual "here we go." This was like a minute later. Agreement in place with Newcastle after long talks and personal terms in place with Bruno since July. Fee worth €75 million. New midfielder for Mikel Arteta. And yeah, I mean, let's get into my overall thoughts. This is an amazing signing for Arsenal. Like, incredible. Obviously this obviously the fee. I'll start with the fee. 75 million in this market is a joke. Like, it's actually a joke. And look, people will sit there and they'll talk about the age that he's 28. He won't have many top years to give you. But this is what's wrong with the market at the moment and the transfer strategy from a lot of big clubs. They care more about resale value than actual winning now. And Bruno Guimaraes is a ready-made Premier League proven guy that is going to start for pretty much any team in the world, in my opinion, and is going to come in immediately, have an instant impact, and help Arsenal win major honours. We've just won the Premier League, we're the reigning champions, and we've gone and signed one of the best midfielders in the world. And when you compare the price tag of 75 million to the likes of Mateus Fernandes, who went for over 90 million, Tonali, Bruno's teammate, who went for 100 million, Elliot Anderson, who went for 116 million, you can argue that Bruno is a better player than all three of those guys. Like, you can genuinely argue that. Some people might choose Anderson. I think Anderson had an amazing season. Tonali's a great player, but I think Bruno is better. So, considering the quality of player we are getting and the experience that he has, I think £75 million is excellent, especially when the reports were that Newcastle valued him so much higher. I mean, I remember we put a bid of like 70 million, and everyone was like, "What? Like 70 million?" Newcastle wanted about 90, and the fact that we got 75 million, it just shows that sometimes these long, grueling sagas can actually end up being pretty beneficial. A lot of Arsenal fans, I'll admit, including myself, were kind of losing their head because we seem to do this all the time, where we just take way too long to negotiate for a player. But in this case, it ended up being a massive benefit because, yes, whilst it would have been better to have him in these first two preseason games, which he won't feature in, hopefully he plays on Sunday, I think we play Como. Hopefully he's announced and ready by then. If not, then it will be the Emirates Cup against Dortmund. But the thing is, with the experience and, you know, his, I guess, provenness at the highest level, I think that he's a player that doesn't really need too much time to, you know, adapt to the way we play, because I think he's built for it. As for like the rest of the saga itself, I mean, it's been really weird, you know. Pretty much every major journalist not connected to Newcastle was saying that, you know, we're in the final stages, talks have been going on for weeks, but it wasn't until like 3 days ago that all the Newcastle journalists even acknowledged that talks were happening. It was strange. It was absolutely strange. You know, you got Luke Edwards, who was consistently banging on that Newcastle have received no approach from Arsenal, and, you know, Newcastle were in a very difficult situation. I'll talk about them later, where they've lost how many players. It's their captain. I understand that they would want... I honestly think it was just like a PR thing. Like, I think that they wanted their journalists to make it seem like they were initially refusing to sell him and that they had to be, like, broken down quite significantly in order to let him go. But then the fee completely debunks that. But anyway, let's get to the actual player itself and what I think this means for Arsenal. Our midfield was very interesting last season. Obviously, last couple years we've gone through a bit of a midfield rebuild. You know, if you look at the beginning of our sort of title window in the 22-23 season, our midfield is completely different to what it is now, especially the pivot. Obviously, we've still got Martin Odegaard. But we had Partey, Xhaka, we brought Jorginho in January, we had, was Sambi Lokonga getting minutes? El Neni? Like, we didn't have a very deep midfield, but it was very, very good. And since then, we've seen the likes of Partey, Xhaka, Jorginho. We've seen all of them leave. Rice was the first to come in, and then it was last summer where we let Partey and Jorginho go, bringing in Zubimendi and Norgard. Now Norgard's gone. He went to Everton, which was to make room for Bruno. And it hasn't been smooth sailings. You know, Rice has been consistently an absolute beast. He's a world-class midfielder. You could argue over the last 3 years he's been our best player, and I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to argue that. But it's been difficult for everyone else. You know, Mikel Merino was originally brought in as the Xhaka replacement. Didn't work. We signed Zubimendi. He started the season well, but wasn't performing well late in the season. Ended up getting dropped by Lewis Skelly, who, you know, ended the season very well after struggling. So I do think that there was a need to bring in another midfielder. I was more so thinking that we would go for someone like an Alex Scott, because going into this window, I didn't think Bruno would be available. I really didn't, and turns out he was. And this is the best midfielder we could have signed. Like, I think this is the best deal we could have gotten to strengthen our midfield. One of the best midfielders in the league, and he is so versatile. He's the definition of an all-action midfield, and it's something that we really need, because there are a lot of different ways that this Arsenal midfield could be built. You know, a lot of different dynamics that we could have. You know, we've seen Rice have multiple different roles in this team. At one point, you know, I remember early in his career he was playing as a sitting six behind Havertz and Odegaard. Then he was moved up to like into an 8. Then he was moved up into like a more advanced 8. This season he's been in a double pivot. Started off as an 8, but then moved deeper into the 6. So I think Bruno is a player that you can put next to Rice in any role. You know, if you want Bruno to be the sitting 6, allowing Rice to go forward, he'll give you a lot more on the ball than Rice. You know, his passing is excellent. But then if you want to let Bruno connect with the forwards with his passing and then have Rice just sit deeper as the 6. If you want to have them both together, moving up at different times, I just think it's a really balanced and dynamic midfield with a lot of different roles that they can all play. But I think the most significant thing that Bruno will offer us is actually at the very start of the season without Rice. Because if it wasn't for this signing, I would be very, very nervous for life without Declan Rice at the start of the season. Obviously, he has come off a ridiculous season where he's been playing, where he's had grueling, like ridiculous amount of minutes at the World Cup as well. Like, the guy needs a rest. Reports are saying that he's going to be rested for the first month or so of the season. And I think Bruno allows us to then do that. Having Bruno puts us in a position where you could put one of our other midfielders next to him, and I think that we won't miss Rice too much. Obviously, Rice is still going to be a loss, right? Especially as a body as well. But I'm comfortable with Bruno being... I'd assume he would be the 6. I would actually probably rather have Bruno as the main 6 and Lewis Skelly as the 8. Like, that's how I think Arteta will probably line up our midfield to start the season. And Bruno, look, I still think Zubimendi will have a good second season. You know, I think that he's had that time to adjust the Premier League. He's shown signs, like, especially if our football gets better, which I think it will. I do think Zubimendi is going to be a good asset to Arsenal. But bringing in Bruno, it just gives us more options, and it also means that even when Rice gets back, we'll be able to rotate him more. You know, I fully understand why Rice was run into the ground the way he was, because Arteta clearly didn't trust Lewis Skelly and Zubimendi, plus Marino Norgard. He didn't trust those players to play at a high enough level in the midfield. He clearly didn't trust them, and with Bruno coming in, hopefully that now gives Arteta the, I guess, freedom to rotate a little bit more, which is one thing that I criticised him for a lot, not rotating our midfield. I think that's a big reason why Zubimendi dropped off. So, yeah, in terms of how he fits the squad, Bruno is an absolutely perfect signing. Like, he is really everything that we need. However, it does kind of make me a little bit worried about Miles Lewis-Skelly long term, because we're not really adding another body to the midfield. Norgard goes out, Bruno comes in. In terms of personnel, like, we've still got the same amount of players, but that does move Lewis-Skelly down in the pecking order. You know, he was preferred to over Zubimendi in the back end of the season, but for the majority of the season, Lewis Skelly struggled to get game time. You know, he started off playing a couple games here and there at left back, wasn't very good, and it wasn't until, late April, early May, like the last 5 games of the season, when Arteta thought, you know what, I'm going to drop Zubimendi, I'm going to bring you into midfield. It was really, really late, and he was very, very good. And bringing in Bruno, I mean, that means that there are now 2 midfielders that are definitely ahead of him, and one that he is competing with. Now, I do think that if you rotate correctly, because Arsenal, I believe we played like around almost 70 games last season. We got to 2 cup finals, got to an FA Cup quarter-final. Like, we played a lot of games last season. So there was a lot of room for rotation that we didn't really do. And if we do similar stuff this season, there will be a lot of opportunity for Lewis Skelly. But at the same time, we don't know if Arteta's gonna really do it enough. And bringing in Bruno, it makes me a little bit worried about him. Now look, he could always go back to left back. You know, if we do sign Vinicius Jr., which I'll talk about at the end, it will give us a bit more license to bring back that more inside fullback, which is how Lewis Skelly plays. I think now I don't really want to see him there, because the way his play style doesn't really suit with the way Arsenal operate. You know, having Calafiori in that free roll to just bomb up the pitch. It really creates, I guess, worries for opposition defences that allows our winger to get more space and come more inside. Whereas if we have a threat like Vinny, I don't think that we'll have to worry about that. I think that having Lewis Skelly moving into midfield and Vinny just doing stuff on his own with Bruno, I think that would help. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but especially with the resurging reports that United are interested in him, I don't think he will be sold. Like, he won't. But it just shows that if he doesn't have a big season, or at least a season where he plays a lot, we could be seeing him on the way out. Let's talk about sorry about that. Fuck. I've been a bit sick lately, if you can't tell. Let's talk about the Newcastle perspective, because I mean, the last year for Newcastle, it's been an unmitigated disaster. I mean, in 24-25, they had one of their probably the greatest season any of their fans have ever seen. Like, they finished, what was it, 5th in the league, won the Carabao Cup, got back in the Champions League. Like it looked like they were really building something special. And then they lost Isak, spent a lot of money, spent pretty much all the money on Voltamada, on Vissa, on Alanga, and it all just completely fell apart. I mean, where they finished, like 11th? Let me check. Where did Newcastle finish? 12th. They finished 12th. They were terrible. They lost 17 games. And then this summer, every single person, pretty much every individual that made that team from a year ago so special is gone. Tonali's gone. Gordon's gone. Eddie Howe stepped down the other day, and now their captain in Bruno G is gone. And it could be getting even worse, you know. United are sniffing around for Lewis Hall, so that could be a deal that ends up happening, and what would they be left with? Look, I do think that Newcastle tend to do very, very well when they're not in Europe. But again, I just think they've lost so much that it'll be very difficult to replace. Like, I am quite worried for Newcastle. I am. I think this new manager that they've brought in, that Matisse something guy, what's his name? He's a German manager from the Saudi league. He came from like Al Ahly. What's his name? What's the guy's name? Where is it? I'm on FOTMob. How the hell do I check the new manager's name? Have they not like officially announced him yet? Is that why? Yeah, Matisse Jaisal, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He had a good record in the Saudi league, and who knows? Maybe he comes in and gets them cooking. Maybe they sign a couple of young players. That Basmata Toure guy from Hoffenheim, I believe. You know, he looks like a good player. But yeah, look, they've definitely got assets in that team still. Like, as it stands, they've got Lewis Hall. We'll probably lose him, but they've got Livramento, they've got Malik Thiaw, they've got Voltamada, who, whilst he didn't have a great season, I still think he can do great things for them. Who else have they got? I mean, Alanga and Wissa were absolute flops. They've still got a few players here and there, and you know, they tend to be good at recruiting. I know they weren't last summer, but in general, their recruitment tends to be pretty good. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how they go next season. I think they could be decent, but then like, if it goes wrong, it could go horribly wrong. If you get what I mean, like, yeah, especially with how competitive the Premier League is now for, you know, the lower teams. Like, it could get dark. But yeah, Bruno Guimaraes to Arsenal. Obviously, it's an excellent signing. For me, it's the signing of the summer so far. I don't think that there is a more impactful signing, or I shouldn't say more impactful, but just an overall better signing than Bruno G to Arsenal. I just think he offers us so much, and for that fee, it's an excellent deal. Like, it's a very, very good deal. But there's still more to do. The main goal of this summer wasn't to bring in a new midfielder. It was to strengthen the attack. And we have only made one attacking signing so far. And whilst I do like Zolis, he is not a player that I would like to rely on. I wouldn't. I would really prefer to bring in a new left winger, whether that's Vinicius Jr. or someone else. And even if we do have to rely on Zolis, there needs to be another forward player. Like, we can't only sign Zolis as our sole attacker this summer. Whether it's Vinny, or if we maybe go in for Alvarez or find someone else, I don't know who. The state of the market is getting me a little bit concerned that if Vinny signs an extension, which the decision is going to be made in the next couple days, I'm hearing online and stuff. If he does sign that new contract, it doesn't leave us with many options. So look, we've got some more stuff to do. At least we've got this signing through the doors. I genuinely think if we get the right player, we only need one more signing and then I'll be happy. Maybe another defender in as like a fringe player, but that's it. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And Bruno Guimaraes, welcome to the Arsenal.